It's pronounced, I believe, Darian Kuyu. Darian Kuyu. It's located in a portion of Turkey that still has the old Bible name, the Old New Testament name in its location, Cappadocia. Cappadocia in Turkey. Well, in that town, a man back in 1963 was renovating his home when he knocked down a wall that uncovered a hidden passageway. And what he found when he walked through that hole that he had created was beyond anything he could have imagined. He found a vast underground city, complete with stables and storage rooms and kitchens and missionary schools and churches. The building of that underground city first began back in 7th, 8th century BC. And the Turks would use it to hide from their enemies. Now, historians believe that even 1,000 years after that, when you get to the 7th through the 10th centuries AD, that Christians used that underground city as a place of refuge during Arab invasions and other external threats. It was literally 18 levels deep. It could hold up to 20,000 people, along with animals and supplies, and it was connected underground to another underground city that was about 5 to 6 miles away. Amazing. But you know what I think is most fascinating about all of this? That everything, the homes, the churches, the livestock, was beneath the surface, unseen. A whole world hidden from sight. You could be standing right on top of it and not know that it was there. You know, just because we can't see something doesn't necessarily mean it isn't there. For instance, Paul in 2 Corinthians says it this way: so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Last week, we started this theme of the unseen hand. The unseen hand of our God is so clear in the book of Ezra, that little 10-chapter sliver located between 2nd Chronicles and Nehemiah is all about the unseen hand. It specifically, and we began last week describing this, is a story about the return of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin and Levi as they came out of Babylon after they had been held captive for 70 years. Now, we looked at Scripture where God's told them, you're going to be held captive for 70 years. And it came true. And just a few verses after that, Jeremiah said, and God's going to deliver you after 70 years and bring you back into your land. That's what the story of Ezra is all about. Well, they have nothing. They're captives. And God basically sends word and says, okay, it's time for a bunch of you to head back to your homeland. And they're thinking, with what? We have no provisions even to get through the journey. God's unseen hand starts to work. And he shows himself. Providence, we call that providence, the work of God. He shows himself first and foremost in this story, and this is where we're at still today, in provision. What are we going to do? We're have-nots. We have zip. And God says, I'll take care of that. And we began reading there in that in that first chapter how God reached into his diversified portfolio. God's diversified portfolio. And he reached in and he pulled out some resources. And here's one of his resources that we often forget about, that we talked about last week. Sympathizers. He may provide through his sympathizers. And who would that be in this case, in this story? Well, it began with the king himself, Cyrus. Now, Cyrus was not a Babylonian. He was a Persian. The Persians had defeated the Babylonians. And so Cyrus was overall, and that very interesting beginning, we read it, and Ezra says, God moved the heart of Cyrus. Cyrus, the old pagan king. God moved his heart so that he said, I'm going to let you all go. I'm going to send you back. And I want you to rebuild your temple. And then we saw that God not only provided through Cyrus, but he provided through the neighbors of the Jews that were Persians, that were not Jewish people. And they began to share all kinds of expensive, valuable gifts with those Jewish people and said, here, take this with you on your trip. Is it because they were such great followers of the Lord? No. They were not close following disciples, but they were sympathizers of that cause. And I find it interesting that even their temple leaders, and you have to understand, the temples that I'm talking about in Babylon are just a lot of idolatry that's taking place. And they're going to those temples, the Persians are, to worship their idols. Well, those leaders, you could call it the preachers of those temples, the pastors of those temples said, we're going to give you a whole lot of stuff that was stolen way back when Nebuchadnezzar went into your land and stole all that stuff out of your temple. We're going to give it back to you. Take this with you too. So God supplies, he reaches into his portfolio, and he supplies through sometimes those that you'd never expect, sympathizers. Now, this one I think is most obvious. Second, he may provide through his people. Now, we said that in a sense, those 40 or 50,000 people that went with Ezra, that they didn't have much. But some of them, of course, had a little bit, and they all had a lot by the time they started their journey because of all of these gifts that were given to them. So you read, for instance, in the second chapter of this book of Ezra, let's say all the way down to the 68th verse. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, after their journey, 40, 50,000 of them, some of the heads of the families gave free will offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site, according to their ability. Great phrase. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 derricks of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly garments. It came from the leaders of the households. It came through the dads, the fathers, the husbands who led out and gave to this cause. And I'll tell you what, these were not tithes. These were free will offerings beyond any tithes. Well, how much can you give? According to their what? Ability. According to their ability they gave. Because you know what God always does? He always gives us one particular ability, the ability to be generous. He always makes sure that he gives us at least enough to be generous. Does that mean we will be? Not necessarily. But he gives us that much so that we can reach out to others, especially other brothers and sisters in the faith, that we might give. I think about, let's see, we're now in our 7th year here. I think about all of the gifts that this church has provided just to the Rasmussen family, just to Jenny and me. Do you know that we still have a drawer in our bedroom dresser, one of our bedroom dressers, that still has food in it, non-perishables, that you all gave us when we moved in well over 6 years ago? Isn't that amazing? I still go and look. Oh, well, yeah, we got some ketchup here. Oh, we got some beans here. Provision coming from the Lord through his people. I shook my head in amazement when I saw the giving of this congregation. Just free will offering just went by and placed it in a special basket when we told you all about the special need that the Van Dykes had. Now, in some ways, we stayed kind of quiet about all that was given in that, but folks, it was thousands of dollars that was given. Very quietly by you. No big to-do. We didn't have big celebrations and give away prizes for whoever gave the most. People gave according to their ability. And God was praised. Last year, 2024, I can tell you this. The average Sunday morning offering was around $3,500. It's very good giving, folks. Very good giving. There were 4 Sundays last year where the giving was $6,000 or more. I think one was over $8,000. 2025. This congregation, you, somehow raised the weekly amount by $500. The average offering this year is almost at $4,000. Almost at $4,000 per Sunday. Oh, and we haven't finished the year yet, and we've already had 4 Sundays that hit that $6,000 mark or more. In fact, last Sunday morning was a record Sunday morning offering. How much over 6,000? It was $17,000 that was given last Sunday morning in the general fund offering. Sometimes God supplies through his people. I think about other ways that you have given according to your ability. And I think about how just within the last couple of weeks, this congregation shared of their hearts with Gene Peterson in the loss of Jerry. Oh, we say loss. We understand. Lost to us here on earth, but forever with the Lord. But that is, in fact, another way that God made sure that Gene gets taken care of. How many times in your life have you been up to here in need only to have the saints, the brothers and sisters that you have in Christ come through. He may provide through his people. And yet, his portfolio is bigger than that, more diversified than that. I mean, he can supply through sympathizers, he can supply through his own people. But how about this one? He may provide through his opponents. Call them enemies if you want. They get there, you know, and they have to take care of this building of the temple, rebuilding, and they can't carry everything that they need with them out of Persia. And yet they do have this wonderful order that came from King Cyrus. Moreover, I hereby decree what you, now he's not talking to them, he's talking to all the surrounding people of Jerusalem area, all the surrounding people of their homeland. They're going back to this homeland, but there's a lot of nations around them that Persia has also defeated and that are under the king's rule. And he says to them, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates. That's Persian money. That's the money of the enemies of the people that are surrounding the Jewish people. But they're under the thumb of Cyrus. And he says, you use your treasuries to take care of them so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed. And then he adds to it, young bulls, rams, male lambs for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil. You see, sometimes they gave animals at the temple for offerings. Sometimes their offerings were food offerings. And he's saying to their enemies, you make sure they have what they need for that. As requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given them daily without fail, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Old Cyrus thought to himself, I want that God to bless me and my family. So I'm just going to tell them, you do everything that you can to help make sure this temple gets built. Now, folks, they had detractors. If you're familiar with the story, there were people that were very opposed to the Jews returning and rebuilding even their temple, especially their temple. And the temple was, remember, that's what they were to build first. Zerubbabel was going back to make sure it got built. Listen to chapter 4, verse 4. Then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. They bribed officials to work against them and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius. So we got Cyrus, and we got, I think it's Artaxerxes next, and so you've got this succession of kings, and through all of this, you've got the enemies sometimes not paying much attention to what Cyrus had told them. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. I'm telling you, they had their enemies. But in chapter 6, which we already read, the edict goes down. I don't care how you feel about these people. At one point in that chapter 6, he even says, you leave them alone, except for supplying them with all they need. I tell you what, they ended up financing Zerubbabel's project. Can't you just hear them saying, I hate it when that happens? Paying the workers supplying their sacrifices, giving them our livestock, giving them our produce. Let me tell you something. Nobody can effectively oppose God if his hand is in it to bless his people. Nobody can effectively oppose God or permanently oppose God. They can try. And often when they do try, you know what he does? He just makes them an example. He makes them look foolish, puppets in his hand. The great apostle Paul was once an opponent of God, an enemy of God. The phrase used in Acts is he was breathing out threats against the church and then carrying them out. And God eventually uses that one man to be the number one evangelist of the gospel that he is so violently opposed to. Talk about the hand of God. Talk about God being able to use those who would be considered his enemies. What about Pharaoh? He thought he could stop God. He hardened his heart. God said, let him go. Okay, I'll let him go. No, I changed my mind. His heart got harder and harder, so God just hardened it some more and said, all right, I'll just use you. And eventually Pharaoh and his army is drowned in the Red Sea. So don't get so concerned about some individual that seems to be opposing you and or your family. Who knows? God may have them end up supplying resources for this ministry that you're working on. Do you remember William Murray? Madeline Murray O'Hare. She had two sons. A younger one named John, an older one named William. Now John worked for his mom's organization with American Atheists. And John and his mom, you may remember, along with a niece, were all murdered in 1995. That was their story, beginning to end. But the older son, William J. Murray, he was the child plaintiff from the school in Maryland that sued and won when the Supreme Court ruled that mandatory readings of the Bible in public schools is unconstitutional. That is what the Supreme Court said after that case. He was the child plaintiff. He later became a Christian, a minister, an author. Maybe you've read one of his books, My Life Without God, where he detailed his spiritual journey of coming to Christ. He is the chairman of the Religious Freedom Coalition in Washington, D.C. It champions the rights of Christians in America. It also champions those who are persecuted Christians around the world under his guidance, under William's guidance. That coalition has managed aid and ministry programs for persecuted Christians in the Middle East and in Africa. Who would have imagined that God would have used him? That God would have used one that came out of that family? But he did. Folks, just don't sell God short. I want to close this with this illustration that I just found this last week. Jenny and I love our nephew Jeff, my brother's son. Let's see, he must be in his 40s now. He's been a good 15 years in Cambodia, and he took a little mission thought from the beginning and made it work. And he's reaching out now to an amazing number of young Cambodians that are coming out of abusive situations, many of them, coming to the Lord eventually, getting an education. He also uses the sport of soccer to kind of pull them all together. They now actually have a campus. And Jeff writes this past week these words. He said, Channy, that's his wife who is a Cambodian, and he married her after he got to Cambodia, and now they have a son named Caleb. He said for 15 years, we had been saving whatever we could, but costs were rising much faster than our savings. And we so much wanted our own house. But he said we finally came to the point where we're, and I'm quoting, where we were content to wait until eternity for our home. And he said, I can ask for the ministry. I'm not afraid to ask for money for the ministry. But he said, regarding our own personal needs, we just made that a matter of prayer. And he said, I didn't realize that it was God's will to provide. Oh, how he provided. He said, we have a dream home that we're almost ready to move into. He said, it's got a front and backyard. He said, it's in a safe neighborhood. He said, we are within walking distance of the campus where we work. Now, he said, that wouldn't have happened without our little boy. Because when he prayed, when he joined us in prayer, he would always specifically ask that the place be close to the campus. And he said, and I quote, at the time, I chuckled when he would make that request, because he said, in my adult knowledge, I thought, well, that's just unrealistic. He said, I'm sure that God chuckled at me and said, just watch me work. Just watch me work. They are now in the final phase of the completion of the home. It is estimated to be complete and ready for them to move in November. Guess what they're calling it? The House of Miracles. The House of Miracles. Our God, don't limit him. No matter how overwhelming, how big your situation is, don't ever limit him. He has a diversified portfolio. And he can reach down in, and that unseen hand can move through sympathizers. It can move through his people. And it can even move through his opponents. That's providence. That's our God. Let's stand together and let's again sing that old song that just says, don't be dismayed, whatever, because our God, he can and he will provide.